Hello. Lynne Franks here with Clive de Carle on the second of our A Certain Age podcasts. We thought we'd talk about leadership today. I'm determined to let Clive do virtually all the talking. That's my theory anyway. There's a few people said I overtalk too much last time. Fans of Clive's, obviously. So we thought we'd talk about leadership today, Clive, didn't we? Do you want to start off with the conversation we were having about Africa and you telling me what's going on there?
Well, yes, something amazing is going on in Africa. In the past, when there have been leaders who've concentrated on freedom and fairness for the people, they've been assassinated, and that's so pretty much always been the case, particularly in Africa, more so than other countries, because the Europeans and Americans and so on really want to keep Africa as their property. Colonization happened, a few hundred years ago, and they don't want to let go of that. So, for the first time, even though there have been multiple assassination attempts, a new African leader, the president of Burkina Faso, uh, Captain Ibrahim Traore, um, I think he's had more assassination attempts than probably anybody has ever had in the world. They really want rid of him. So, basically, what happened is uh, Burkina Faso wanted to rebel against the French colonization and oppression and ownership of the mineral rights and oil rights and so on. So many countries around the world basically owned Burkina Faso's wealth. So Ibrahim Traore has succeeded in basically nationalizing pretty much everything. And obviously the people love him because suddenly the people can see the money being shared for the first time. So if anybody doesn't know about him, I would urgently suggest you should check him out because, while a military president is hardly the ideal, you might say, um, for Africa, where, Burkina Faso, for instance, had insurgents for decades who were trying to overthrow the government funded by other countries. And so, unfortunately, in that country, it's got to such a degraded state that uh, military violence uh, seemed to be the only solution. But as far as I know, they took over very peacefully, and the previous president was just caught behind one of the latest coups. Um, and his excuse was, well, he had a lot of medical bills to pay, and the $2 million he was paid to, give away the secrets of where Traore was going to be that day. He had to do it. He was forced to do it. Great excuse, I think. Um, so I think there's great hope because so many other African countries right now are following Traore's lead. Um, Algeria being the first major one to do it, chucking out the French in a number of ways. Um, so, yeah, it's very interesting and hopeful that actually all the other African countries, if they're not too controlled, might decide to follow Burkina Faso's lead. It's actually amazing.
It is amazing. And following your signposting me into some information about this amazing guy, I was looking at what he was doing with agriculture as well. I mean, it has to be said that the Americans have been trying to badmouth him and make out he's out there taking the money, which he isn't. And what he has been doing is particularly giving the farmers the wherewithal and the tools and the seeds and everything they need to grow their food and more than enough food for themselves and become independent. And of course, it is the overseas powers, the Americans, the Europeans, as with all the African countries, they're just looking for the minerals and to take the wealth out. And he's putting the wealth back into the land through the agriculture, among other things. And I think we all need that over here. And it's really interesting that Africa, which was always considered the poor man's continent, is so far ahead and will be so far ahead in so many ways as they take more control of themselves. It's fantastic. And on the subject of leadership, which this man truly is, I've just been thinking about the recent elections we've had over here, and actually the amount of people that came out to vote was so small compared to the past. I mean, it was only regional council and mayoral elections, but the numbers are way, way down. And you were saying this morning that something you saw, I saw it as well, where it showed who would you vote for. None of the above was the majority of the ticks. Was that what you said today? Is what you said to
Well,
me?
exactly. More people tick for none of the above than any of the official candidates, supposedly. But in my opinion, if, and it's a big if the UK was a democracy, which of course it isn't, um, if less than 50% of the population voted for a government, then we shouldn't have one. If 51% voted for a government, i.e., they voted, well, okay, they voted for a government. But if only whatever it was, 36% of people actually voted, then by default, I would suggest that the other 64% didn't want government, full stop. So imagine, after the summer holiday break, Parliament, the MPs didn't come back. Well, what would change? Well, I don't think very much would change because it's only when they're working that things get worse.
Well, I have to say, to a large
So,
degree,
so I mean, we've
they're
got to
not
sort of,
all like that. So I'm just sorry to interrupt you there, but because I have a real deep affection and admiration for my local MP, Sarah Dyke, who happens to be Lib Dem, but it's like the party politics is almost irrelevant if you've got an MP like Sarah, who actually listens to the people that she represents, talks to them, she's out and about all the time. And she is unfortunately the minority in many ways, that she really does put her energy back into the community. And to me, that's true leadership. And that's not what we're seeing on the general basis. Mostly
well,
the
my question to that would be, well, why doesn't she stand for an independent? Why align oneself with a party? And I mean, no MP can agree with everything their party tells them they have to say. I can't understand why somebody, if she's as wonderful as you say, just isn't independent. Say, well, I'm sorry,
I
politics.
think the reality is that I don't know. That's a question for her, not for me. But my suspicion is because if she'd gone independent, she probably wouldn't have got voted in. Because in Somerset, where I am, people feel comfortable with something they know, and they know Lib Dems, and they feel comfortable with them. I mean, I'm looking at all the sort of different voting patterns. Anyway, we shouldn't spend too much time on that because we know that the system is archaic and broken, and we have to create something new anyway. So, looking at true leadership from the grassroots, how we can see more of that happening. You put me on to CABI, which is what the Council Assembly of the British Isles or something, which is all about local community. No, it's Community Assembly of the British Isles, and it's all about local communities creating their own leadership and their own strategies about what they want to do in their community. And I've got sort of more involved following them. And there's others out there. Talk a little bit about all these new, fairly new since COVID, since Standing in the Park type community networks that have been growing considerably over the last year or two.
Well, um, there are, as you know, hundreds of thousands of organizations around the world. The thing is that all these small organizations need to put aside their individual differences and individual focuses and all come together at once and say, look, if if government wasn't there, we could fix the roads ourselves. If government wasn't there, we could decide whether we want a natural health service or a pharmaceutical health service. Real decisions could be taken at local level. And if the local village or local small town needed help, then they could go to the bigger small town and give them the good reasons why they want that help. But if government was printing its own money, like we talked about last time, rather than relying on debt-laden, interest-ridden central bank currency, um, we could have abundance.
And I was just wanted to ask you about something I just saw in the paper, which I don't know if you've seen, which is that the National Health is giving pharmacies permission to inject people with all these terrible things that are stopping them losing weight. Or rather, not stopping them, get them to lose weight in a fairly artificial way. But I think you pay £9.99 and you get your, what do they call those stop eating injections that people are having all over the place. Anyway, you know what I mean. So it's like anybody could go into a pharmacy and say, I need to lose weight, and here's my £9.99, and can you give me an injection? And as we know, these are all fairly new inventions, I suppose one would say. And there hasn't really been a lot of work on what the long-term effects of these injections are, although it has been proved that they do have side effects and that if you stop taking them, you'll put the weight back on again. And it is not an easy and natural way to lose weight. But now anybody can get them for £9.99 in the pharmacy on the high street. What's your thoughts on that? Have you seen that? You might have not seen that yet
No, I didn't know that. I mean, the thing is
today.
that before anybody considers injecting or taking some unnatural substance, which isn't just growing in your garden, one should research it because time and time again, from like the thalidomide disaster, where an untested drug was given to pregnant women, everyone was born deformed. From then on, people have realized that actually these things aren't 100% safe. They're, as you call it, there may be side effects. And if it's an unnatural thing that you inject into your body, then unnatural things are going to occur. But I mean, to give untested, untried things that have been out for a few months to mass populations, they made films about that kind of thing happening where, they inject everybody and everybody dies. It's um, people need to not necessarily trust what they're told in the media, but do their own investigation. I would say if you spend 5 minutes researching the dangers of Ozempic or some
Ozempic, that's the word I was looking for.
yeah,
Yes.
within 5 minutes you'll see the disaster zone that's being caused around the world as a result of it. And um, uh, in my opinion, I would want to study it incredibly closely and get several opinions from not from doctors who, one way or another, their profession relies on drugs, but whoever you would like to trust with that sort of information. But it's all online.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to say that not only have I got who I consider a good MP, but we have got a really good doctor in Wincanton where I live, running our medical centre. And I've heard him speak on a number of occasions of the importance of eating healthily, supplements, exercise, and the natural ways to health. He is, pretty unusual, let's face it. And the ease in which it, for many doctors, just in terms of expediency and any other reason why they need to do things in a hurry, this doling out of pills, of chemicals of all kinds is obviously extremely harmful. You as a leader in the natural health movement with all your different supplements and research and study have shown quite clearly that there's so many other ways of doing things naturally. I'm going to lead you in on that because obviously that is your belief that it is all about natural health and the Secret Health Club, which you can talk about.
Well, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, I went to visit my local GP and I said, look, I just want to ask you a question. Um, do you know that 180 years ago, for many, many years, doctors like you recommended iodine for various hormonal issues and particularly for thyroid issues? And he knew that. So I said, well, look, what's your protocol? Imagine I was a patient with a thyroid issue. You know that iodine was the traditional remedy. Later it was discovered that iodine and the mineral selenium worked really well together. But for 100 years or so, doctors would say, you've got a thyroid issue, here's iodine. The American government mandated iodized bread and iodized salt for the Midwest, where the farming practices has eroded the soil so much they were all getting goiters where their thyroids swelled up, try and get more
God.
iodine from the air. And, so that was mandated. Even the American government back in 1910 or whatever it was realized the importance of iodine because without iodine, children born from a mother who's low on iodine will have a low IQ. It's super
Wow.
important. And so I went to the doctor and said, what about iodine? Can you offer that? So, oh no, we can't do that because the NICE regulations, the clinical excellence, thing, dictates that we must offer this, levothyroxine first, then this, then that, and then only after that can we say, well, seaweed might help or iodine might help. They're not allowed as doctors to break NICE guidelines, as far as I understand it. And I think your doctor friend, uh, if he's working privately,
He's not my friend and he's national health. I've never spoken to him, but I've
yeah.
heard him speak.
So, I mean, the
And
doctors that I know who suddenly woke up and realized that, hang on, people aren't low on drugs, they're low on nutrients, actually stopped being a doctor. But that worked. Most of them are scared because of the massive salaries they're getting compared to the rest of the population. But in actual fact, with a lot of them, they've turned it to their advantage by giving up being a GP and having to follow the rules of the license. With all that doctor's experience, being taught for 5 years about the body and what does what and so on, um, as a non-doctor, an ex-doctor, a lot of them are doing incredibly well because there's a huge, people still have respect for doctors because they do know, a lot, particularly emergency room doctors. I've got a lot of time for emergency room doctors because their job is to save your life, simple as that. Other doctors have, unfortunately, other motives, it would appear.
there are good doctors out there, as there are
There
good
are.
everybody's. And just now somebody started mowing my lawn right in the middle of this. Can you hear it?
No, hopefully you can't hear the aeroplanes that have been going overhead here either.
No, I can't. Okay. So the Secret Health Club, I just want to bring that up because that's something that you started quite a few years ago now. And do you want to explain about it? Because people certainly that might be watching this because they, like my podcast, may not be as aware of it as your thousands and thousands of followers.
Well, for many years I used to do consultations. People would come to me with health issues, and I'd attempt to explain how that person's body could repair itself if given half a chance. But then, 2014, I started what's called secrethealthclub.com, and the idea of that was that I would put down in a simple A to Z, you look up your health issue, here are a bunch of solutions in video and article form. And we've now got it to a stage where we're just having manufactured little USB sticks. So, for instance, your internet went down for some reason, all the knowledge that you need, which, if you like, would have been in a health encyclopedia, hopefully there are the answers from a natural perspective as to how to overcome, well, pretty much every health issue that's around. So it's
Yeah.
quite,
So, yeah, so I know anytime I've needed to look at certain things, you've got the information there. I mean, you are by nature an actual researcher and academic far more than I am. I'm like in the second, and then with my ADHD running off to the next situation, whereas you do have all this information, which needs to be shared, I'd say. To get back to leadership, the way I sort of look at things is as you know, is that I'm a big um, promoter of women in leadership in community, creating small groups or pods where they do initiatives that are right for their communities and they connect in with other people in their communities and all these pods somehow connected with each other. So it's the me, we, us, the women that I work with, which come from a very, very wide background of different ages and experiences come together, first of all, on their own healing. And there's so many women out there that are traumatized in one way or another, which I find heartbreaking. And then coming together as a group and supporting each other. And then as a group, seeing what they can do to support their communities. That's my whole vision. Why I promote, put so much time into Seed and into What Women Want, which is my other project I'm launching. And I feel that clearly women and men have got to create this new future together as leaders from the grassroots. But equally, women, there seems to be a feeling that women are in a powerful role, but they're truly not. And the women that are and talk loudly, and particularly in politics, not my local politician, but others, do it by behaving in a way which they think is the right way. It's always like a parody of men. They talk louder, they shout louder. We've always got that thing, Mrs. Thatcher, where she was taught to speak lower and slower, so she sounded more male in her voice, wouldn't then be accused of being sort of rather like a screechy woman. So what's your feeling about this kind of cooperative future that I'm always going on about, where women and men come together as leaders? Because we've both got pretty different skill sets. I mean, it's silly to generalize, especially as we've got more than two genders these days. But what's your feeling about the future of leadership and how we can make a difference and how we can come together in our communities, perhaps in our online communities? What does that look like for you? That's a big question. I should have warned you.
No, no,
Sorry.
it's fine. I mean, the problem is, where are they? I mean,
Mm.
in Parliament, there's Andrew Bridgen. Maybe there are a couple of other really good parliamentarians, like Sarah Dyke, perhaps, but they're very
Stella
few and
Creasy.
far
Yeah, there's a
between.
few.
So, but where are the leaders? Where are they? Where are the women leaders? Name 10.
Mm. Oh, I could. I'm making lists of them at the moment to invite to my What Women Want in Westminster in
But
June.
are they leaders? Okay, they're leaders, but is it one of them powerful enough that, for instance, the whole country could come behind her? You know,
Well, you're going back to parliamentary leadership, which is not what I'm talking about because I don't believe in that.
okay,
What
whatever level you're talking
I'm
about, is
talking
there
very
somebody
local level, you know, that there are
stronger?
heroes in every community doing extraordinary things, men and women, all genders, who are doing extraordinary things for others. And whether it be going around delivering food boxes or whatever it may be, I come across some extraordinary stories, but it's like, how can we bring that leadership, that grassroots leadership together to inspire each other, inspire community to community and create change? And what does true leadership mean? My uh, wonderful former because she's passed away, spiritual leader, Daddy Janki of the Brahma Kumaris, used to talk about leadership being incognito, meaning it comes from the grassroots up. And rather than the traditional leadership has always been very hierarchical and it's high, comes down. If you look at boards of companies, government uh, set up structures, so it's all linear, down, up to down, and run a completely different way. The way I've always seen it is it's from down to up, and it's how we support each other that is actually true leadership and creating change. Um,
Is leadership the wrong word?
Maybe.
Because people don't want necessarily to be led, perhaps, but what they want to be is inspired by a great person. And I think rather than having a great leader, we should have a person who inspires greatly, because I think that's what's really important. You know, a leader almost uh, could be a bit dictatorial, perhaps, but an inspirational. I can't think of the right
No,
word.
well, it's you're right, and it needs perhaps leadership is the right word, but it needs a reanalysis of what does that mean. That's why I'm saying that Daddy Yankee always said it's incognito leadership. It's not somebody who needs to be at the top, who needs to be seen and about, as we're seeing in America right now, the leadership there. It's all about being seen and yelling out and who's got the loudest voice and it's all looking from my books. It's all looking for mummies patting them on the head syndrome, with
But
whether it be Trump or Musk or any of them in a way. And it's like, okay, true leadership is you don't need to be seen and yell, letting out and coming from a state of ego. It means you genuinely want to be there in service. It's service, actually. It's service leadership, isn't it? Which I think a lot of MPs would say that's how they do feel, or that's how they felt when they were go into Parliament. It's not that they're the wrong people or anybody really. It's the systems that are wrong and archaic. And it's time for change. That's my feeling anyway.
so, in answer to your earlier question, if let's say I was in charge of What Women Want, the website that is, I think I'd be encouraging any of these inspirational leader type people to make a short video about what they did, how they did it, and how you could do it. And just have, so, somebody's uninspired, they're lost, they're feeling down. How can we possibly get out of this mess? They can watch video after video after video of women, maybe men, children, whatever, saying, this is what I wanted. This is the situation I wanted to solve. I saw this problem locally. Here it was. I decided this would be the answer. This is how I instigated it, and this is the fabulous result.
Mm.
And I think, inspiration.
Inspirational leadership, which is a great, well, certainly I agree with you on that. But the other thing that I feel very powerfully about is peer mentorship, which again, I'm working with some extraordinary women who've had a really, really difficult time and a difficult life. And as much as they want to be healed themselves and to move into a state of loving, peaceful joy from their anxiety and trauma, they all want to be of help and service and assistance to others. Every one of them, every one of the women that I'm working with. Again, this is not a women men thing. It's just my work's with women, and it's not about power or being seen or making lots of money. Well, obviously they all need to make a living. It's about it's about service.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
lot that I learned from Daddy Yankee as well. That life is so much more rewarding. I mean, you've said that to me before when you've gone into, or anybody goes into a business, new business or any kind of business project, just thinking about the money, it won't work. You've told me
Well,
that.
it might do, but
Oh, it might
yeah,
do.
the good idea is usually followed by the other things that you want. But let me ask you, let's say somebody's listening to this and they want to mentor somebody. I imagine there are loads of websites out there that would connect the mentor with the mentoree. Do you know of any? So people
Well,
listen
if they're
to this,
women or people
yeah,
identifying as women,
oh,
we have to
whatever.
do that this week. Um, they should come to Seed. Thank you for that. Because seednetwork.com is exactly what we're putting together. And are already practicing it actually, both online groups and real-time groups in the Southwest. And we're just about to start some more, what I call pods, where women are coming together and supporting each other and sharing skills and working on basic seed programs that I've developed over 25 years and learning to be seed mentors. I mean, even that the trouble is mentor, coach, leaders, these words get so kind of distorted by overuse. And I'm still looking for the language, but that's basically what it is. They will be shown how to become, and a lot of it comes back to self-confidence because very few people I've met, very few of the women I work with that haven't got skills and gifts that they could share and wisdom. You know, they've had life experiences, sometimes some horrible life experiences of life. So they have so much to share from their own their own knowledge of what happened to them. So yeah, so come to seednetwork.com, sign up, or Lynne Franks, that's what we're doing, is we're actually relaunching the whole of Seed on that basis from the autumn. Men, now that's another thing. Don't know about that one. Maybe you should start that one. I'm sure they're
Well,
out there.
I mean, it used to be that apprentices and mentors were the norm.
Mm.
You'd want to decide to become a blacksmith, and you'd be an apprentice, learn the skill. And clearly, when people retire, they've got so much, well, often they've got so much life knowledge that they could help people set up small businesses or whatever their skill happens to be. And I don't hear of that particularly happening on a big scale. And I wondered whether there is already existing a really huge database of people who want to be mentored. And, so some easy way,
I
either the
mean,
other
it sounds
side.
like the sort of scheme that the government say they've set up or are going to set up, but I've never seen
No, I'm
anywhere.
not expecting them to help. I
No.
I wonder whether, like when the Let's scheme was in operation,
Yes.
whether a big organization has achieved that goal that one person can be,
It used
matchmake.
to happen at local business level through things like Business Link, which haven't existed for years. And the mentors were mostly retired bank managers. Mostly they were white men in suits. And I know from my own experience that the women that I work with always found them very patronizing and it didn't work. And it really does need to be peer mentors. Or maybe we should look at that. Maybe in our spare time from all the other things we're
Well,
doing, we
you
could
have
set it
spare
up.
time, really? Sure about that?
No, don't have spare time at all. But it's something that we're put out there, though. Well, you could do it if you like, or
No,
somebody who's
no, no, I don't
watching.
want to.
But I
I
think it's a good point. It's a different kind of a system. We've got an educational system that in itself is totally archaic and needs to sort of reset. And so we don't have that system where people can find mentors. And maybe that's something I can do with Seed. I have worked with teenagers and young people myself, and there is so much that needs to be done, and it can work on a family level. I mean, I'm very close to my two oldest granddaughters, as you know, and we talk about everything. So in a family level it can work, but on a bigger level, and for young people who have been through not the easiest time with COVID, locked up, all the screen stuff, social media, and all the stuff that's gone on with their mental health being affected, it's like they really do need to have people in their lives that they can turn to and get not sort of official box signing, but just genuine support and help. And I think it is a lot of the grandparents who, the ones that have still got their brains and that can actually support them from their own experiences, whether they're somebody else's grandparent or somebody in your area. So I'm going to look at that in my spare time. Okay, so that's so leadership, and that brings us up to talking about the elders, the wisdom keepers in in traditional societies, and indeed in societies like Asia and Africa, where we started this conversation off, the elders are seen as the wisdom keepers, and both men and women are generally there supporting young people and teaching the skills and the experiences that they have. And we've totally lost that in the West. And maybe that's one of the answers is, you've just become a grandfather of a gorgeous little boy. I mean, maybe that's something that needs to be looked at is there is a wealth of wisdom out there with people who in the traditional Western world feel pretty much useless, used up, invisible, men and women. And in fact, they have such skills they can share. So maybe that's something to put out there into the cosmos and see where it's plant those seeds, as they say, as I
Well,
say.
we may already have planted a seed with somebody who is already fairly familiar with using AI. You could generate a website that was a mentoring website in a very short time if without a computer programmer, if you really know how to do AI. I mean, maybe you can find
Well, I'm
somebody
working with some very
help you
smart women right
set up.
now, and one of them is very, very good on all that technology. So we are looking at peer mentorship on it, but
Well,
maybe that other aspect of young people, sorry, saying.
no, well, it strikes me that that would be worth going for big time because I think it would resonate with a lot of people who, feel, well, I am useless because I used to work, I know all this stuff and don't know how to get it out. If you've got somebody who can help you do that,
So are you handing
I,
this over to me to
well,
do
yeah, no,
this
it's nothing to do with me.
hugest this
Nothing to do with
hugest
me.
plan ever? All right, well, as long as you help me with it, we do it together in our spare time, whenever that happens to come. Not very often. Okay, well, I think we covered an awful lot today, one way or another. We weren't going to talk about Africa, but clearly Africa's the continent to watch. Amazing things going on there, I'm glad to say, because they have suffered terribly with wars and violence and the colonial powers just exploiting them for their natural minerals. And let's hope they're now in charge of their own destiny more and more. And I certainly support them in that. Maybe we should all go and live in Africa. I don't think they're too welcome. Anyway, maybe, maybe that's the future for now. So anything you would like to add before we sign off from a certain age for this second episode?
Well, when you're asked to comply with something you don't agree with, which might end up funding wars and death and so on, decide whether your conscience uh, allows you to do that.
The check where your tax, if you pay your tax, where it's going, or check where your bank invests in, that sort of thing.
Well, that people might be investing in stocks and shares in companies that are actually arms dealers, not
I think
realizing
that
that.
awareness has been for quite some time, I think, don't you think? And I think a lot of people don't invest in stocks and shares like they used to, do
No,
they?
but a lot of people have insurance plans,
That's true.
and they'll be investing in whatever makes the most
Yeah.
money. They're not
So
usually
find out where your investment,
ethical.
where your insurance and your pension is
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
Sure. Good wisdom. Good wisdom. Well, hopefully we're slowly getting wiser as we get into our certain age. So, well, thank you. We've covered so much today. We have to think about what we're going to talk about next time, but there's always so much more, isn't there, to share, which has been a delight. So hopefully I won't get too many complaints this time that I talked over you too much. I shouldn't have a coffee first. That's the answer. Okay. All right. Well, have a lovely day in the sun as you are, and see you next time.
Okay. See you next time.
Bye.